The sunrise over the Arizona Territory was a familiar canvas of fire and dust, but this morning it felt particularly oppressive. I'm John, a man whose life has been measured in the rhythmic thump-thump of train wheels, a conductor with more regrets than years. The smell of coal smoke and dry desert wind was my constant companion, a stark reminder of the unforgiving miles that lay between one dusty outpost and the next. Our locomotive, old and weary, groaned as it pulled away from the desolate station at Tucson, a metal beast carrying its burden deeper into the vast, indifferent heart of the frontier. My routine dictated a meticulous check of the cargo car. It was a labyrinth of stacked crates, baled hay, and the heavy scent of raw timber. My boots crunched on loose straw, and the dim light filtering through the high vents cast dancing shadows. That's when I saw it. Not a crate shifted, not a loose barrel, but a tiny, dark opening in a pile of old canvases, barely big enough for a child. A cold knot of dread tightened in my gut. I moved cautiously, my hand instinctively dropping to the familiar, worn grip of my revolver. I peeled back a corner of canvas, and there he was. A boy, no older than 9 or 10, his eyes wide and dark, shimmering with a mix of terror and fierce defiance. His clothes were of simple buckskin, worn but clearly not settler's attire. His hair, long and braided, was unmistakably Native American. A Comanche boy. My blood ran cold. The Comanche were warriors, fierce and proud, holding strong to their lands, and this boy, clearly, was in hiding. My first thought was a torrent of grim possibilities. A runaway, a captive, or perhaps far worse, a target. Every instinct for self-preservation screamed at me to close the canvas, to pretend I hadn't seen him, to deliver the freight, and nothing more. But those eyes, so young yet so utterly resolute, pierced through my hardened shell. I saw not just fear, but a profound vulnerability, a desperate plea for an unknown salvation. I couldn't leave him. The train's endless rumble suddenly felt like the beat of a drum, pulling us both into a dangerous, inescapable rhythm. The desert sun climbed higher, relentless, baking the metal of the train. But the real heat was in the passenger cars, a simmering tension of fear and prejudice. Word of Indian troubles had already spread like wildfire through the small towns, carried on the telegraph wires. The passengers were a volatile mix, grim-faced settlers guarding their meager possessions, loud-mouthed prospectors fueled by whiskey, and, chillingly, a group of hard-eyed bounty hunters led by a man named Silas, whose reputation for ruthlessness preceded him like a foul scent. I'd seen him eyeing the cargo car with an unsettling intensity. I made discreet trips to the boy, whose name, I learned through a few whispered words, was Toka. He was thin, barely eating the stale bread and water. I offered, his eyes constantly scanning, wary. He carried himself with a quiet dignity, a stark contrast to his desperate situation. Keeping him hidden was a constant, agonizing gamble. Every creak of the floorboards, every loud laugh from the next car sent a jolt of panic through me. I overheard the bounty hunters talking in low, gravelly tones, their words slicing through the general din. "Heard there's a reward out," Silas drawled, his voice like grinding stones. "For a young Comanche, son of a chief, they say, worth a fortune." My heart hammered against my ribs. A chief's son. That changed everything. This wasn't just a runaway. This was a powder keg. If word got out, if Silas knew, it wouldn't just be Toka's life at stake. It would be the entire train, caught between the bounty hunters and the wrath of the Comanche if their chief's son was harmed. The stakes had just soared beyond anything I'd ever faced. The train rattled on, each mile taking us deeper into Comanche territory and deeper into a desperate, silent war. The sun began its slow, agonizing descent, bleeding across the vast western sky in hues of blood orange and bruised purple. The light inside the train was fading fast, casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to twist and writhe with the mounting dread. The rhythmic clack-clack of the wheels suddenly seemed to falter, then slow, growing louder, more deliberate. My gut clenched. We were slowing down. Too much. The train jolted violently, then, with a deafening screech of metal on metal, it shuddered to a complete halt, throwing passengers from their seats, a collective gasp rippling through the cars. I was in the passenger car when it happened, just near Toka's hidden spot, sharing a whispered word of reassurance. The sudden stop was a thunderclap. Panic erupted instantly. Shouts, screams, the frantic scramble of bodies. What in God's name was that? A woman shrieked, clutching her child. I pushed my way to the engineer's cabin, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. What I saw outside the grimy window chilled me to the bone. Not a broken rail, not an animal. Silhouetted against the dying light, rising from the shadowy folds of the terrain, was a formidable, silent wall of Comanche warriors. They appeared as if conjured from the very earth, their painted faces stark. Against the fading light, their rifles gleaming ominously, they were utterly silent, their numbers growing by the second, fanning out around the stopped train like predators encircling their prey. Then, a voice, deep and resonant, cut through. The rising panic from outside the train. It was a Comanche warrior, riding forward, his voice clear and deliberate, speaking in broken English. He wasn't pointing at the strongbox or the general cargo. He pointed directly at the passenger car, then, with chilling specificity, gestured towards where Toka was hidden. "We do not want your gold," he declared, his voice carrying an unnerving calm that froze the blood in my veins. "We want the boy, the son of Chief Redhawk. Give him to us." A stunned, absolute silence fell over the train. The passengers, moments ago consumed by fear of a general attack, now looked at each other with a mixture of confusion, suspicion, and dawning horror. I felt all eyes, sharp and accusatory, turn towards me and then towards the terrified, hidden boy. The air thickened with unspoken questions, with the cold, hard realization that the orphan I had protected was the heart of this confrontation. This wasn't just a raid, this was a demand, and it had just put every soul on this train in direct mortal peril. The Comanche chief's demand hung heavy in the twilight, a terrifying weight that seemed to crush the very air inside the train car. The son of Chief Redhawk. The words echoed, in the sudden absolute silence, stripping away any pretense of a common bandit raid. The passengers, who moments before had been a jumbled mess of general panic, now turned on Toka with a chilling, desperate ferocity. "Give them the boy!" A man screamed, his voice raw with fear. "He's not worth our lives!" The car erupted in a cacophony of shouts. "Comanche blood! He's an enemy! Throw him out!" Captain Miller, his face a grim mask, drew his pistol, his gaze flicking between the enraged passengers, the implacable Comanche. Outside, and the terrified boy. I stepped forward, my body a desperate shield, placing myself squarely between the frantic, prejudiced mob and Toka, whose small frame trembled uncontrollably. "Wait!" I yelled, my voice hoarse, trying to cut through the rising tide of hysteria. "We don't know the full story. We can't just hand him over." But fear had turned them into a beast. Silas, the bounty hunter, his eyes gleaming with predatory intent, lunged forward, pushing past the other passengers, his hand outstretched, aiming for Toka. "That reward is mine," he snarled. I reacted on pure instinct, tackling him, sending us both sprawling amidst the scattered luggage and terrified screams. A gun went off, wildly, the deafening blast echoing in the confined space, lodging a bullet in the ceiling with a shower of splinters. In the sudden, jarring chaos, Toka whimpered, his small hands clamping over his ears, tears streaming down his dirty cheeks. The Comanche outside remained utterly still, silent, formidable witnesses, their patience now visibly wearing thin. Then the Apache leader spoke again, his voice now colder, sharper, cutting through the echoes of the gunshot. "He carries the mark of his mother's tribe," he declared, his gaze unwavering, focusing on a subtle, faded tattoo on Toka's wrist that I hadn't noticed before, a symbol of the sun dance. "He was taken during the raid on Lone Butte 3 winters past. We have searched tirelessly. He is our future, our son." The revelation struck me like a physical blow, a bolt of understanding. Tearing through the fog of fear and chaos, Toka wasn't just a chief's son. He was a child stolen, a victim of a past atrocity, living in plain sight, hidden among the very people who had, perhaps unknowingly, harbored a painful secret. The passengers who had screamed about Comanche blood moments before now stared at Toka with a sickening new understanding, a horrifying realization of the historical injustice they were witnessing. The prejudice was still there, thick and tangible, but now it was laced with a chilling fear of ancient wrongs, of cosmic retribution, and the very real potential for a full-scale war right here, right now, if this was handled wrong. I looked at Toka, then at the Comanche chief, the truth dawning with sickening clarity. This wasn't about a random raid. It was about the reclamation of a profound loss, a deep wound in their tribe's spirit. And I knew, with a sudden, fierce, and undeniable certainty, that I couldn't let them hand him over to Silas or anyone else. There was a higher truth here, a wrong that demanded to be set right. I would fight for this boy. The weight of the Comanche chief's declaration settled heavily on the train, silencing the frantic shouts, extinguishing the last embers of the mob's fury. "Our future, our son." The words echoed in the chilling twilight, a profound statement that stripped away all pretense and forced a grim, undeniable truth upon us all. The passengers, though still wary and unnerved, finally quieted, their fear giving way to a grudging, almost solemn comprehension. Captain Miller, his face pale and etched with the weight of his own internal struggle, slowly, deliberately holstered his pistol. He looked at the subtle tattoo on Toka's wrist, then back at the unyielding yet expectant Comanche chief, a silent, profound understanding passing between them. "How do we know this is truly him?" Miller finally asked, his voice low, addressing the Comanche directly, now devoid of aggression, tinged instead with a heavy, newfound respect. The Comanche chief stepped forward, his gaze locking onto Toka's small, upturned face. He began to speak in his native tongue, a melodic, guttural stream of words that flowed with an ancient cadence, a language of the land. Toka, who had been shrinking into himself, slowly, hesitantly raised his head. A flicker of recognition, a fragile, hesitant spark ignited in his dark eyes. He whispered something, a sound so faint I almost missed it, a child's forgotten word, an echo from a life stolen. Then hesitantly, he repeated a few words in Comanche, words that seemed to bring a profound, agonizing relief to the stoic warriors outside, a collective sigh rippling through their ranks. Tears welled in Toka's eyes, not of fear anymore, but of something akin to a forgotten memory finally resurfacing, a distant echo of home, of family, of belonging. Seeing this undeniable connection, this raw emotional reunion, Captain Miller made his final, decisive choice. He nodded to the chief, his gaze meeting mine in a silent acknowledgement of shared understanding and responsibility. "He goes with them," he stated, his voice firm, resolute. "But on our terms, safely, no more bloodshed." Silas, defeated, melted. Back into the crowd, his dreams of reward shattered. I walked Toka to the open door of the train car, my heart a complex mix of relief and a strange, aching sadness. His small hand, no longer trembling, clutched mine tightly, a final, silent bond. The Comanche chief waited, his expression unreadable, yet his eyes held a glimmer of profound gratitude, a promise of peace. I knelt before Toka, meeting his gaze, seeing a nascent strength, a new hope already forming within him. "You'll be safe now, little warrior," I told him, my voice thick with emotion, a lump forming in my throat. He looked at me, then back at his family, and in his eyes I saw not just hope, but a newfound peace, a quiet acceptance of his destiny. He had been found. As the Comanche chief gently took Toka's hand and the warriors melted back into the vast, silent night, disappearing into the shadows of the mesas, a strange, profound quiet descended upon the train. The passengers, shaken and subdued, began to process the enormity of what had transpired. We had been caught in a historical current, a raw, painful glimpse into the long, tragic story of stolen children and broken promises, of two worlds colliding. I felt a profound, irreversible shift within me. The weight of responsibility for Toka had been immense, a suffocating burden, but in facing that fear, in standing up for him, in bearing witness to his truth, I had found a purpose beyond the dusty tracks, beyond my own jaded existence. The train eventually pulled out, its whistle now a softer, less mournful sound, leaving the empty, silent desert behind. The gold was safe. The lives were spared, but something far more precious had been exchanged, a truth revealed, a stolen child returned to his people, and a hardened conductor reminded that even in the unforgiving crucible of the Old West, some battles were fought not with guns, but with empathy, with courage, and with the simple, dangerous act of choosing what is right. The landscape outside blurred, but the image of Toka, walking into the night with his true family, remained sharply etched in my mind, a beacon of hope in a world too often consumed by shadow.